I went to bed at like 10 or 10:30, and I just had a pit in my stomach, and I just thought, oh, hell, it's gonna happen.
I didn't think the SOB was gonna make it.
Of course, we were all optimistic. We all thought we were on history's side. We all thought we had this in every possible way. That did not turn out to be the case.
We're screwed. The LGBTQ community is screwed.
Oh, we fucked.
Well, I just happened to drink myself to death.
We felt like we lost 40 years, and we're starting to realize we may have lost a lot more.
The number of kids who didn't feel safe to even go to school.
My oldest granddaughter started crying because she's 10. She knows that he doesn't like people like us.
I'm not sure if I'm on their birth certificate. Do I have to adopt my own kids?
There were white supremacist bikers across the river, and it was like people were freaking out. They were going through a mostly minority community, like, yeah, we own this and you can't do anything about it. Meanwhile, everybody over there was just going on about their lives, but they wanted to send a message.
We gotta do something quick. Like, protest anything, everything we can do.
I feel like I should be doing more.
People are going to have to learn how to fight and be good with their, fight with their words.
For me, what started turning it was the energy in the anti-Trump resistance.
I think the first thing I did was I went to the Women's March in D.C.
There was this amazing feeling of, we're in this together, and we're gonna be okay, and we're gonna, pull through this.
There were more protesters than there were people at the inauguration. Normally, I'm the type of person who's like, you bring up Hitler, you've lost the debate. I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore. I mean, Hitler, he rose to power, and it took him 9 years from that time to sign off on the final solution. I don't think he's going to have a unless there's a fascist overthrow of the government, which could fucking happen. I mean, with the refugee thing, where a judge said it was unconstitutional and that we should be letting these people in, and then Trump called on the military to overrule the judge's orders. Small thing. I'm gonna take that back. It's not a small thing.
People are comparing him to Hitler. People who lived through the Holocaust are comparing him to Hitler.
We've allowed this man to come to the stage. But at the same time, we've also forgotten about the voices of those very people that put him in office too. They're the poor, they're the disenfranchised. And unfortunately, with what's going to happen, they will become even poorer and more disenfranchised.
They're right to complain that they have been forgotten.
He'll say the one thing that they want to hear, and they latch on to that. And because he was saying this other outlandish stuff, they're like, oh, he doesn't mean that. He doesn't mean, oh, he would never. Somebody else is latching onto that, just like you latched onto this. Yes, he does mean it. Yes, he is going to try it. Maya Angelou, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. He told everybody who he was. They didn't believe him.
Everybody says, we've never seen anybody like this before. Well, actually, we have.
Germany had the strongest, most powerful, most effective gay liberation movement in the world at that time. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power, and 2 years later, gays and lesbians were going into concentration camps. And right now, with the political climate as it is, I'm really scared that something like that could be happening in the United States.
Trump puts other people in positions of power that are basically neo-Nazi in nature, or alt-right, as they like to say.
Camp of the Saints. You know, one of these latter-day brown people invading the country of white people dystopic fantasies. You know, and these things were pretty common back in like the, you know, later 19th and early mid-20th century. You know, kind of it was the kind of views on race that fed right into the, you know, Nazi views on you know, the Aryan race and such. But this thing came out in the mid-70s, and Bannon has evidently been championing it for years, and it's kind of one of these touchstone texts of the so-called alt-right. So I mean, that stuff is still in the White House.
Oh, the foreign policy was like peace through strength on the White House page, and it sounded straight out of 1984.
This president and the party he represents have run on victimization, on the idea that that things have been done to us by other people, by foreigners, by Muslims. Sounds very much like Hitler's stab in the back theory and anti-Jewishness.
With everything that happened with the refugees and targeting specifically Muslims and that kind of thing, I'm not personally affected by it, but it means that there is a chopping block.
It is only a matter of time before he goes after us specifically.
It took Donald for the racism to surface.
They can act out in any manner they want now that Trump's in office.
That they don't have to be politically correct.
Bullying has increased.
It's open season on,
It's open
on
season.
any of our minorities. It's not just...
Whereas it's not like they just appeared out of nowhere.
I got called a nigger bitch in downtown Pittsburgh. I got called a nigger bitch by these group of white guys, and they said to me, my pretty black mouth looks like it can do some good sucking.
It's hard not to feel like less worthy, you know, under this type of presidency. You know, obviously, for most people, if you're not a billionaire, Trump doesn't give a fuck about you. But if you're already a marginalized person, it's gotten even further away from getting to a place where it can be stable, or you can possibly imagine being happy or being accepted or not having a fear of violence.
Okay, my name is Alex Smithson. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am the maternal parent of 4 kids and 3 going on 4 grandkids. I'm trans, in case that wasn't clear enough.
I knew at a young age I was different. Maybe age 4 or 5, I knew that something was wrong.
I wanted these Barbie dolls, and I wanted this Hannah Montana wig and all that stuff. But at the time, my mom was like, "No, you cannot have that."
Being transgender is not something you just choose. It is who you are.
Especially when you transition, you're changing everything for your family, you're changing everything for your friends. nobody would willingly make life harder than it already is.
It's like people don't choose to be gay. They don't choose the color of their skin.
And I think the biggest thing people think is, oh, you were a female and now you decided you want to be a male. Or you were a male and you've decided you want to be a female. Transgender, the more research that they do, the more they're explaining it. It is totally a brain thing. Your brain identifies with the gender you're identifying as. It's just your body didn't change in utero. And I think as time goes on and as science progresses, they'll be able to prove that you're totally born this way. And like I said, nobody would pick this. The hormones change your body. You know, your body gets tired after the surgeries. The surgeries are painful. It's just, you wouldn't willingly do this to yourself if there was a way out.
For many of us, it may have taken us a while to come to that place and to know who we are as trans people.
Again, this was way before the internet, so yeah, there was a lot less information out there.
I didn't know trans people existed till I was like 35 years old. So my question was, why do I suck so bad at being a woman?
If it wasn't because of the internet and just word of mouth, I don't even know if I would have been able to transition.
With the right information, people are younger coming out and having the ability to express who they really are in the world. And in expressing who we really are in the world, we're not only making ourselves more authentic, but we're making the world a better place.
I still see amazing young transgender people saying, you know what? I don't think I fit into male or female, and I don't know about hormones yet. I just want to be me, and can you call me this, which isn't my given name, but it's what resonates with me, and just how bold that is. Or the people who say, hey, can you refer to me by they and them pronouns? Because again, male and female don't fit, and how bold that is. You know, if you feel like you're going to be pulled over by the language police because it isn't grammatically correct, imagine how scary it is to ask someone to use it.
People wanting to be called by the correct pronouns is why Trump won. It's like, there are a lot of problems with this country that led to this. It is not because people want to be treated with respect.
He said, I have a daughter. A rock can't turn into a tree. I said, of course a rock can't turn into a tree if you mistake that seed for a rock and throw it away. But if you take that seed and you plant it in the ground and you give it a firm foundation and you nurture it and you give it what it needs to reach its potential, then of course it can turn into a tree. And honestly, if you throw it away, it might still turn into a tree. Perhaps in defiance, perhaps in resilience, or even in spite of you. But it will no longer be a tree you can call your own.
So when we talk about transgender or transgender people, we are really talking about expression. And it's not about bathrooms. It's not about who do you go to bed with. It's not about what body parts you have. We're really talking about expression as a human being.
I'm a man of trans experience is how I always explain it. Just because you're transgender doesn't mean it has to take over your entire life. It's just a little piece of you.
My gender is just one part of me, but at the end of the day, I didn't change my gender. My gender changed me.
The biggest issues in terms of being a transgender person for us is insurance. Everybody, every American, I don't care if you're gay, straight, trans, it doesn't matter. You should have medical insurance. You should have health insurance that is affordable, that's not going to put you into bankruptcy. You know, it shouldn't be a question of you can't afford this, so you're going to die.
I have two friends that they have pre-existing conditions. One has had cancer, one has diabetes. They were not able to find health insurance or anyone to sell them health insurance for any sum they could pay until Obamacare came along. It's got its flaws, it needs fixing, but it has increased the coverage of a lot of Americans. It has helped reduce healthcare cost overruns. Is a possibility, at least the Congressman was estimating, that without Obamacare, several rural hospitals will shut down, which, in case our public haven't noticed, means the jobs will be killed.
Not covering prostate exams for trans women, especially if they've had their gender marker changed on their documents. Like, oh, why does a woman need her prostate checked? I heard about a trans guy who had ovarian cancer, who had a lot of difficulty getting it treated.
With the Liberty Caucus, I think what they want to replace it with is graveyards.
And for transgender people, it depends on the person, but we experience dysphoria, self-body hatred, stuff like that.
Dysphoria or gender dysphoria, for someone that is transgender, this doesn't go for everyone, but they don't feel that their body coincides with how they feel in their mind.
It's very difficult for some transgender people to get their birth certificates changed, to get their documentation changed. It costs us a lot of money to transition. My main thought was, and it's probably selfish, but it was my insurance. How am I going to afford these surgeries?
We should be able to sell universal health care to conservatives. Simply the idea that tying health care to your employer was a great idea after World War II to get people back to work and get through the baby boom. But nowadays we've seen that employers have learned how to game the system to change your hours or create part-time roles where full-time career positions used to exist to avoid paying benefits. How many people in your community have felt the need to stay bound to an employer, to a position that was not right for you, perhaps even to a romantic relationship that was not right for you for any number of reasons, because the threat of losing your benefits and your access to health care and insurance were too great.
And my transition has put me into so much debt. You know, you have the average person, you know, paying college loans, you're paying for a house, you're paying, you know, you want to start a family, you want to do this. Well, they shouldn't also have to be paying off their body.
Okay, I'm Sabrina Snore. I live out here in Butler, PA, born and raised here. The only time I left was whenever I went into service. 50 years old, I've been out now 11 years, 9 post-op. I came out on a job. I work at the local steel mill, which is very conservative, very right-wing. My hairstylist, she was, you know, she's like, I don't have a problem with gay people and stuff. I know people there, but she's saying, you know, I don't know why you're all upset over, you know, Trump taking out, you know, the LGBT page.
Oh, they're just like gonna change it, and they're just like, and it's like, what do you mean? Oh, they're just gonna change it? Like, yeah, I was freaking out because it was gone completely. It doesn't make that much of a difference if they're taking it out and updating it so it's worse. It's a negative step.
You don't get it. It's like, it's not that the fact of doing that is that we don't have rights. And then, you know, she's like, oh yeah, you do. And I'm like, no, we don't. I'm like, I can be, you know, you can tell me to get the hell out of the store. We don't like you he, she freaks. You know, I said, you can do that. I stand and says, I can, you know, I could got fired from my job. They can say that. And she's like, they can't do that. And I'm just like, yeah, they can. She's like, oh, really? Oh, you know.
Keeping your housing, if you transition, if, you know, your landlord has a problem with you, we're not a protected class from housing or employment or public accommodations.
When I was a child, gay sex, consensual gay sex, was illegal in pretty much every state of the Union. In Tennessee, it was a felony that could get you 15 years. Supreme Court case, Elaine versus United Airlines, back in the 70s, where the court basically ruled that an airline had a right to dismiss a pilot who was a qualified pilot, had an outstanding flight record, simply because she had had a sex change. A transgender woman, Christine Littleton, who had married a man, lived very happily together until he died. There was a question of medical malpractice. She attempted to sue for her husband's death, and the case was dismissed by Texas courts because she had no standing, because even though she had completed surgery, even though she had altered all her documents, even though they had gone through a legal marriage, Texas ruled that she was still a man and therefore could not be legally married to her husband, and therefore had no right to sue in the event of his death. Somewhat after that, a lot of transgendered lesbians started marrying their girlfriends in Texas because, thanks to that law, Texas would give them a legal lesbian marriage.
And when I tell them this, that we don't have rights, and they're like, first they argue with me, again, that, nuh-uh, you're wrong. It's like, you know, I'm like, no, we're not. And I was like, we're not under Title VII. We're, you know, there is no laws. There's, you know, there's no Title VII, no other, you know, bills there. And then they're like, well, you sure? And I'm like, first of all, I'm like, yeah, I kind of studied these things. You know, these are one of the things, you know, for my survival, I need to know these things, you know. And then finally they're like, well, that ain't right.
And so that's one of the problems with this sort of states' rights approach to these protections. It's that you're limiting the freedom of movement for, you know, all of these people, because if, you know, I have rights in this one state, but if I'm a student and my parents get a job and we have to move across the country to some state where there are no protections, like what happens there?
Or they'll say, we should have a straight parade. I'm like, hey, you can have the parade. You know what? You want the parade? Fine. It said, give me my rights. I stand and said, you actually think that I'm going to spend my Sunday going down there and marching for something I already have? The only reason we're marching is because we don't have rights. You give us our rights, and guess what? You won't hear us ever again, because why would we go and march on the streets, saying we want right? Why would I spend my time going to the city council meeting and taking my time trying to convince them to have a non-discrimination ordinance if we already had it? I don't want anything extra, but I ain't going to accept anything less. You just treat me just like every other employee here, and that's what I want. And that's the only thing I want.
So my name is Ciora Thomas, from Pittsburgh. I'm 28 years old. Grew up in poverty as a trans woman of color. Grew up in a Baptist home, which was really strict and hard to grow up in. I wound up homeless and into sex work and things like that to survive. I work in the mayor's office as an advisory council member. I started an organization called Sisters United. It's going to be a homeless shelter for the transgender population in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania that's transitions into permanent housing.
It's been hardest on my family. I think it's always harder on your family. I'm an amputee. I'm a 4-time cancer survivor, but I'm also trans. And the trans part seems so little to getting your arm cut off.
And I'm looking at the differences of how I'm treated now as to how I was treated before. That's a pain in the ass. If I see a woman walking ahead of me, I pull back so I'm not too close, or I'll cross the street. I actively do those things because I remember it's only, a few years ago. The bullshit I have to deal with at living as a black female, is it worth giving up and taking on the bullshit of living as a black man? And I was just that miserable.
It is not easy, because every day that I step out and say, this is who I am, I have to start all over again. And because not everybody who knows me as a transgender person. They know me as Daniel, they know me as the guy down the street or the neighbor or whatever. And so every time you disclose, you start that process all over again.
You guys can go out in the park, like this park right here, and you can hold hands and you can kiss. But as for me, I walk around and I get people stared at me, and I get people even calling me out. It's like, is that I'm fucking mad? I'm just like, this is what I have to go through. You guys don't even have to worry about any of that because you're cisgender.
There are many times where I walk down the street, there are people I knew 20 years ago that don't even know me. And I make a decision, do I connect with that person? Or do I want to disclose and put my story out again? Do I want to shake their world up? Because that's what I'm going to do. There's a lot of power in that. There was a senator who asked me, well, how many transgender people are there? And he said, because we don't have any records. And I said, well, I'm one. And he didn't realize I was transgender. And he got really quiet. And he almost wanted to, you could see him wanting to run because he didn't want to talk with me.
My therapist told me the story about another transsexual there who had been mugged as she was leaving the center. And she was horrified, really shaken up, obviously, at being mugged and robbed, but absolutely ecstatic that the mugger had called her she.
In the trans community, like passing privilege. I can walk down the street without people pointing. I can not get misgendered when I get the groceries. It's nice, and I forget it sometimes. And then I have friends who don't pass as well. And I'm just reminded of those first few months, and sometimes when I was like really broke and I had short hair and I looked more like a dude. But I do pretty well. I've told people I'm trans and they're like, oh, when are you going to start T?
Oh, I didn't know you were transgender. So everything changes for that person's perspective. However, my perspective of that person hasn't changed.
Most of the time, people who don't know me take me for a born woman. And that's wonderful. Because if they take you for a born woman, they treat you like a woman, which is all I'm asking. Even if that's not always advantageous.
As far as men go, they understand wanting to be a man. It's great to be a man. They can't understand someone wanting to give up, needing to give up male privilege to be a woman. You have somebody who could have been seen as this tall, strapping man, and they gave it up to be a woman. Like there's a mentality, like you could tell it's not liked and it's not so much spoken about, but it's like you know it because trans women get murdered. Like the 2016 was just a really bad year because it's, these are people that would treat women badly anyway, but then they find themselves attracted to a trans woman, or they want to be quiet, keep it on the down low because they're embarrassed. And there's the general devaluation of female life, and then a trans woman, they're like, no. And they don't want it to reflect on their masculinity because this other person willingly gave it up.
It takes a whole team to make a dent in a campaign. It only takes one person to make a dent in my head.
The biggest thing you have to do every day is get up. You have to face your dysphoria, depression, anxiety, whatever, and try to go out and live normally and just hope that you pass well enough that nobody gives you any problems.
All these articles about trans women going missing, about people being murdered. If I dwell on it too long, I get afraid to walk out my apartment door. I mean, Pittsburgh is a great city, and overall, it is incredibly accepting. But it just takes one person to end a life.
The bill passed taking rights away from transgender students. The suicide hotlines increased tremendously. I had people on Facebook PMing me all hours of the night like, we're just going to take our own lives, there's no point in living anymore.
Even the fact that over 40% of us as a group have attempted suicide. I mean, you create a climate where we feel under siege and we feel like it's hard for us to just live, to go to the freaking bathroom out in public, to go to the grocery store, to, just feel safe walking down the street. This whole business of walking while trans. That's an existential threat. I mean, whether it's suicide or whether it's just, withdrawing into your shell and not going out, that's not living.
There's a certain amount of safety in living in the shadow. You can stay in your world. However, right now we need people to step out of that. And I know that's not easy to do. I know that every day that I go out in the world as I am and express who I am, it's always in the back of your mind, is somebody going to figure it out? Is somebody going to say something? Is somebody going to respond? I mean, unfortunately, as trans people, oftentimes that's what we have to deal with. Even though we'd like to kind of minimize that, it's always in the back of your mind. Safety is always in the back of my mind.
I'm not sure you'll ever be able to eradicate bullying, but I think in many cases, if you're a transgendered kid or a minority kid and the person picking on you is someone from the majority, the usual reaction of the school authorities is going to be to try and shut you down because they don't want to go up against the majority to defend your rights.
But now I'm looking at everybody and to make sure that there's no one there giving me that glare of evil and hatred.
We would like to be able to be out in public without, being murdered.
I figured within inside of a year I would be physically assaulted. I just kind of accepted that as fact.
I'm a cashier, and it prints my legal name on every receipt. Some guy comes through my line. I wear nail polish. I finished ringing him up, handed him his receipt, and he was like, "Thanks, young lady." And I'm like, "I'm a guy." And he's like, "Not with painted nails, you're not." Do these people know that I'm trans? Is it obvious? Does this guy know that I'm trans, or does he just have an issue with my nail polish? I don't think that it's likely that somebody's gonna see the name on the receipt and then come back and murder me, but it's kind of in my mind.
I had been for lack of a better word, bashed, assaulted. I was punched a lot in my gut, made to swallow powdered bleach.
Say what you want at your own risk, because you will get punched in your mouth, jumped the whole 9 yards, and don't play victim afterwards. Like, oh my God, I got jumped by a bunch of black people. No.
Well, my girlfriend at the time, we broke up. She kicked me out. I spent a week couch hopping. At that time, I had to do some things that I did not want to do, but I wanted a roof over my head. Being a trans man, people like to use your body. You're this fairy tale, this thing that everybody loves but don't like at the same time. So they just view our body as a sex object or nothing at all. Or at least that's my opinion of how I was treated. This one guy that I used to talk to, he had a wife, kids, everything. It was okay. I'm like, can I stay with you? Yes. And I'm watching a movie, and at the end of the night, I'm sleepy. I get a text message from him, and he's like literally sitting right there. Can you suck my dick? No. Your wife, first of all, you have a wife, and you have kids. What? You want a place to stay for a couple of days, don't you? Yes, I do, but I don't. That's an area of my life I would not like to revisit at all. If I could do anything differently, I would. I don't. There's getting raped. Yeah. Being homeless is not fun for a trans person at all.
People take advantage of us, and they kill us and hurt us when they know we're afraid. If we show them that we are not afraid and that we can come together and that we can stand together, it's going to let them know that we are not to be messed with.
So you wanted to talk about bathrooms. Oh God, where do I begin on that?
If I go to North Carolina today and I used a particular bathroom in a particular setting, I would be breaking the law.
North Carolina had been where House Bill 2 was passed, the infamous bill that limited the use of restrooms by transgender people according to a designation on their birth certificate that was not necessarily up to date, accurate, or easy to change, reflecting of who that person actually is. And this creates a tremendous danger, as well as paints transgender people out to be the danger rather than more likely to be the victims of danger in a restroom situation.
After he got elected and they started talking more about transgender individuals specifically out of the LGBT, and when he reversed the rights of the trans students, I knew right then he was not only attacking LGBT, he was solely attacking transgender individuals.
Somebody finally went, "Oh, trans people use the bathroom. We should suddenly be concerned about that."
Transgender people have always existed. We've always sort of been here.
You've been using public bathrooms with trans people for years and you didn't know.
There are literally no cases of transgender people assaulting anybody in any restroom. That is a figment of the imagination. It is a flat-out lie.
The politicians who are so adamant for it, they're the ones you have to watch in the bathrooms. They're the ones who would do something to a woman if they even thought they could get away with putting on a dress and going into the bathroom.
We should ban U.S. senators from using public bathrooms.
There was a guy who dressed up like a woman, wasn't trans, but he did, and he got arrested. He got arrested. There are laws on the books. HB2 doesn't do anything to protect anybody.
I've been using the women's bathroom my entire life. This has never been an issue. It's crazy that this is happening now.
Do you know who Christine Jorgensen is? She was sort of the first high-profile transgender woman here in the US. She sat down for an interview with, and this is so funny, Nipsey Russell. Do you remember Nipsey Russell? African-American stand-up, or he was a comedian at least. And this was 1958, and he was interviewing her. Early in the recording, he asked her, well, do they feel like there's a man in the restroom? And I'm rolling my eyes like, boy, this sounds familiar. And she says, oh, no, we usually chat and all this. And she says, but as far as she's sort of alluding to this whole business about sexual predators and whatnot, she says, there's really very little sex in toilets. 1958! Are you listening, North Carolina? Half a century later, and the same conversation is still out there. So
there's really nothing to report. There might be trans women getting attacked. I mean, there are trans women who get murdered, but you're not hearing about trans women attacking women in the bathroom. You're not hearing about trans women raping anybody. That's a non-issue.
Well, Pennsylvania used to be a kind of double trap because supposedly they had a law that said you could not use a room other than your birth gender, and another one that said you could not use a restroom other than your apparent gender.
It reminds me of the years ago, and I vaguely remember this as a kid, is seeing the colored signs, colored only, in the bathrooms.
If I was to go into the men's room, that's not going to be a good situation. I'm going to be perceived as a sexual being then. I'm going to be arrested because I'm in the men's bathroom.
We're talking about humanity. When is it that we have forgotten that we're dealing with people?
You have anxiety going to the bathroom now. You're worried if the wrong person's going to walk in, or if they don't have a stall, or XYZ, any of those issues.
I was able to chaperone some kids at a Penguins game, and several of my kids who are trans or gender diverse, they actually asked me to escort them to the bathroom because they didn't feel safe, in public spaces. Maybe their school might have been safe, but now, anytime they were outside of their home or school environment, they weren't sure.
We went to North Carolina, and I was in the airport, and I even asked where the bathroom was, and I was directed to the guy's room. So people don't know what's in your pants or not in your pants. It's just they're basing it off of, I think, fear.
When people are scared, they make legislation.
Legislating peeing is legislating being.
A deliberate attack upon us, upon our right to exist.
It's about making it functionally impossible to exist as a transgender person in the community.
Things are going to the Supreme Court. Do we really need to keep saying, oh, we'll go back to the states and figure it out? It's just a waste of time and energy to keep doing that circle. And that's what he's doing. He's not saying, I support this. It's just like, it's not important to me. Let the states decide. It's very dismissive. It's very shitty. Very Trump.
They're not going to stop us from going into the bathroom. I mean, that's impossible. Unless you're going to be checking my area, there's no way that you're going to have me not walk in the woman's bathroom.
There are stalls. There are no urinals. You go in, you close the door, you lock the door, and the only way anybody sees what is between your legs is if they are sneaking up to the door and committing a peeping Tom offense.
I just pee, poop, and then wash my hands and I get out. That's it.
It's not that deep. It's not that deep.
As trans people, I think the mirror we throw up is our humanity. And that's what people don't want to look at. We're seeing everything, warts and all, as well as the good aspects of ourselves. And that's what scares people, because our vulnerability is our very strength.
As you're aware, about a month ago, Donald Trump walked back on the Obama-era guidance on transgender students and affirming their rights in public schools. This was in the lead up to the case of Gavin Grimm, a teenager in Virginia's case being heard by the Supreme Court. And he said this is a states' rights issue for the states and for the local municipalities perhaps even to decide. This was an unfortunate and honestly horrendous decision to make, and really puts in jeopardy the people like myself, especially the young ones, who are just trying to figure out who they themselves are at a time when they need love more unquestionably than at perhaps any other time in their lives.
Whatever bathroom someone feels comfortable in, and whatever bathroom they feel safe in, is the right bathroom. And it throws non-passing trans people under the bus.
It's certainly a fractured community.
We're not as homogenous. We're not as on the same page, even about LGBT issues, as I realized.
People who were more into sort of assimilation into the dominant culture and a sort of we're just like you narrative, as contrasted to people who were more in favor of a gay liberation, not wanting to be exactly like everyone else, but still being, respected and treated fairly.
I lost more LGBT friends than anything, particularly lesbian friends, because they weren't as understanding as what trans guys were.
Nobody talks to me within the lesbian community at all. I'm just like to them. The gay community, it goes one of two ways. I'm either this object that they want to have sex with, or I'm a woman. We're split up. There's no unity. Just we're not together. Like, they look at trans people as sex workers, Frankenstein.
A thing, an alien.
I feel oftentimes that organizations, and I'm not going to mention names, however, have not encompassed the real issues of the trans community. We've highlighted one group or another group. So we've siloed the community in response to the people who are supporting us who have their own discomfort about transgender persons. And I've experienced that myself within the LGBT community, that I'm that token trans person that, we will only have you speak when it's convenient, because it doesn't fit our political agenda at this point. And by siloing our own communities, we end up weakening our ability to be able to stand strong.
Intersectionality. So you have these layers of identity that overlap, and when these identities overlap, it changes how you experience either one of those identities. So me as a black trans person, my experience will be different from a white trans person, and it will be different from a black cis person. At those intersections, you still have racism, you still have sexism and misogyny. You have all of these isms that exist in society still present in the LGBT community, because we're all part of society overall, and we don't just sort of leave all of that at the door.
I've met queer people who supported Trump, and they were all white. They were all cis. I think they were all men.
White gay men in particular, I think, especially if they're wealthy, they can be insulated to some degree from the more negative effects of having unfavorable policies. They might have better job security by being able to sort of blend into the boys' club already. And so those things might not be a priority for them, and it's disappointing that they'd be willing to throw the rest of their community under the bus to get a tax break or something.
And we should be focusing on what to do about this rather than fighting within the community about who within the community could have caused this.
It's never as glorious to fight for the right you've already got. We won as the LGBT community, marriage equality.
There were a lot of more privileged than other queer people, gay people, who were like, all right, this is it. LGBT rights, we did it all.
It's scary to think that all of this progress that has happened in the past, decade or so could very easily just go away.
And I think Trump sort of recognizes that, that's not all there is. I think most people sort of unless you forget about trans people.
When it comes to transgender identity, the same will prove itself. That we not only have to fight to advance our rights, but we have to fight to assert and protect the rights we already have.
I had to decide whether to save up for surgery or be in school. And I had a lot of older gay people tell me that insurance laws were changing, and by the time I was ready to have surgery, they would just cover it. And so I should put my money in school, which is what I did. Kind of wish I had money for surgery right now,
There's a lot of narratives around being trans enough, where you're not really trans if you're not doing hormones, or you're not really trans if you're not planning to get surgery.
When were you thinking about getting top surgery? And I'm like, I don't know if I want it.
Not all trans people transition. They just choose to express how they feel, and that's all right. So that's a misnomer. And that is another part of the community that we really need to embrace as well, because oftentimes they feel shut out.
If I got top surgery, it would be something that I did to get along more with the world around me than something that I would do for myself. It would help with my survival, but at the same time, making sure that it's covered and the recovery time from it is going to be more difficult. Depending on who you're talking to in the community, there is a certain stigma against bottom surgery. For trans guys, it's not really all that advanced yet. I have a friend who is a trans woman who recently had bottom surgery, and she expressed that there's some hostility towards trans women who have had bottom surgery from within the community.
I don't feel like it's my place to tell anybody else who they are, and I'm not going to let anybody tell me who I am either. So
I never knew a flower that can grow by itself. We are all interconnected, whether we are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersexed, cisgender, whatever you want to call yourself, or minorities, or whatever. We're all just basically human beings. And I think that's our strength as transgender people, is we are a reflection of humanity.
I love the view here. I don't come out here anywhere near often enough. It's my cute little metropolitan. I love it. 2015. It's air intake cooling, fuel injection. I love it. I've been driving it since October, and I drove it all throughout the winter. But I grew up in the Adirondack Mountains, so the cold didn't really bother me. I just got a little blanket to make sure that I didn't get frostbite. What has Trump done for us? And the short answer: nothing good.
He's sort of a perfect creature of the media.
Trump's a puppet.
Puppet?
This is an individual who did not release his tax returns, as has been the practice by Republicans and Democrats alike for generations. That he has boasted about sexually assaulting women. That he is trying to put in place religious bans on people entering our country.
It's disappointing that some of the just sexist, racist, just misogynist, xenophobic things that he and folks affiliated with his campaign said.
Who said the things about women, said the things about trans people, said the things
Handicapped
about
people.
black people.
He made fun of handicapped people.
Made fun of handicapped people.
Those things weren't enough to dissuade those people from still voting for him.
There's not a category he didn't touch that he didn't make fun of us. And I fit a lot of those categories. So in reality, I'm really pissed off.
President Trump has repeatedly said that he is not against gay people, he's not against trans people.
He says he is an ally for the LGBT people, but I highly doubt he even understands what a transgender person is.
There are people definitely falling for it, and that's really distressing.
It's not true. I mean, for God's sakes, he has Mike Pence as vice president.
Everyone's like, impeach, impeach, impeach. Okay, then we're going to be stuck with fucking, Pence.
And the most hateful and most disgusting human being.
I think he pretty much started a rural HIV outbreak because of his policies.
Voted against equal pay for women, and it went the time when he was governor for Indiana. He supports conversion therapy.
It's just astounding that it's even still out there as a thing, let alone that the vice president of the U.S., for F's sake, is an advocate for it.
The things that those therapies can do to you, like if you survive them, they'll destroy you mentally. That type of therapy made me just flip. like the gay label itself just made me flip because it had been associated with so much pain and bad stuff. So with a vice president that supports something like that, that's not even like humanity.
He's a frightening man.
Pretty soon, Pence is going to be dancing with Trump. Pretty soon. Trump is just signing shit. Not even, yep, we're going to sign it. Women, we're going to sign it. Gay, trans, we're going to sign it.
I think the presidency is just for his gain.
If all his trappings of riches and everything else were taken away, he would implode. And I think that's sad.
I'm not putting you down for being Republican. I'm saying this man isn't it. You know, he used to be Democrat, and he said, well, I'm going to be Republican because those people are stupid.
God knows this country needs a sensible, level-headed, principled, conservative movement that can provide criticism to liberalism and other philosophies, but we don't have one. What we have is a reactionary movement that wants to shut the 20th century down and go back to the 50s. Why? I don't know. The 50s were when taxes for the rich were up to 90% of the top income. It was when 1/3 of the country was in labor unions, and they don't like labor unions. They don't seem to like anything about the 60s, actually, except for racial segregation.
We still live in a time of where America wants slaves, and America wants bigotry to be tolerant and be there and be evident. It let me know that I'm black.
I remember when Dylan Roof, the man who killed the 9 people in the church, when he was picked up, the first thing that I saw commented about it was, man, there goes Donald Trump's Secretary for Racial Justice.
Let's not focus on Donald Trump. Let's focus on the people around him that are the ones who are essentially building a dismantling democracy is what they're doing. They're trying to make it a theocracy.
The danger comes as much from them not knowing what they're doing as it does from knowing what they're doing.
One of the things that happened recently is that the new administration revealed the 2020 census questions, which struck down previous ideas to ask questions about gender identity and sexual orientation to get a better snapshot in 2020 of the United States' LGBT community. And this is yet another step towards erasure of our needs and our concerns as part of this population.
When you have a president and a vice president that are on TV and that are basically dehumanizing this entire group of people and writing them out of the census and trying to pretend that this doesn't exist, the younger generations of people my age and younger, are more accepting and open, and there's not really any problems. Like, people are okay with it.
So he's not even logically thinking about shit. He just wants to dismantle what a black man did, what Obama did. That's his only form of action, is that this black man is not going to get away with this, making this country diverse. This is going to be a white man's country, and that's what he wants it to be.
He represents a party, or leads a party, that is adamantly opposed to gay and transgendered rights, that is opposed to gay marriage, that is opposed to gays having kids, that would probably fall over itself to enact anti-gay legislation the minute it could. And I really don't think Trump has the spine to stand up to them on that.
Anything he's doing, which is bullshit anyways, to make good with queer people, isn't with queer people. It's with cis white gay people who make more than $50K a year. You know? Trans people aren't included. Gay people of color aren't included. And even the people who are included, he's not making any strides for.
We feel as though we're at our lowest point, and we have no one to support us, and that means our president. He's not supporting us. This is our test of fate. This is us being able to show America that we can stand up against this.
Of all of the qualified candidates, we ended up with this orange clown. What does that say about us?
You know, everybody's saying, well, Donald, grow up. He's not going to grow up because we're dealing with someone who is stuck. He's essentially, I view him oftentimes as a 12-year-old boy that's never grown up.
A reality TV star is our president.
It's awful, but in some ways, this is the president America deserves. When you're shitty to the rest of the entire world, when you're shitty to your own people, killing your own kids with lead water and redlining so that no one has an equal chance of education, it's just... And the kids who do get into school, let's saddle them with, $200,000 of debt. And then wonder why they're not buying houses.
He is a projection of the very things that we don't want to deal with. Donald Trump is our shadow. He's the very shadow of our society and of our world right now. I feel sorry for the guy personally. I think there's not much there.
I am a sophomore from City Charter High School. I'm 16 and I reside in the north side in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I'm a trans-identified person.
As I was watching the election, there was like a 38% Latino vote for Trump. I was like, wait, something isn't right here. Because I know my own people will not be voting for Trump.
ICE has arrested over 700 people.
2/3 of the 9/11 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia isn't on the travel ban. Make sense of that.
That he'll build his freaking, so glorious wall.
A wall on the border is going to do anything except waste money. The wall isn't going to do any good unless it's garrisoned, which is going to be a heavy ongoing expense. Saying that Mexico is going to pay for it is absolutely ridiculous. Mexico is a sovereign nation. You can't force them to do something like that. 400 people a year are supposed to die crossing that desert into the United States. 400 people. They're risking death to come to this country. And you think a fence is going to stop them when death wouldn't?
Illegal immigrants aren't the problem in this country. This country is for everyone. And it's not just one group of people that is bringing crime and drugs into this country.
One nation, liberty, and justice for all. That's America to me. Liberty and justice for everyone, not just for real Americans or for rich people, for white people, but for everybody. And when you start saying, no, there's this class of real Americans and rights only apply to them, then it's not America anymore. It's not. You're betraying everything that makes America America. We don't want immigrants. I have to point out that Alexander Hamilton was an immigrant. Patrick Cleburne, Scarlett O'Hara's daddy. John Paul Jones, Andrew Carnegie, Eddie Rickenbacker, the World War I ace, and the number 2 ace, Frank Luke, were both the sons of German-speaking immigrants. This country is defined by immigration, by the right of anybody to come into this country and become an American and make themselves an American, and that's always where we have drawn our strength. When we start trying to make it some kind of pure country that only the right people are admitted, then we turn our backs on what makes us unique, on what makes us exceptional. This whole immigration issue has just become something that's a reflexive reaction. It's not based on the realities. I mean, illegal immigration is denying, but we're being told it's a more important problem than ever. Barack Obama deported more illegal aliens than George Bush. But he prioritized going after people who were felons, who were bad people. And he was willing to extend amnesty to people who were actually obeying the law other than being in the country illegally.
Before with Obama and possibly Clinton, it was a more progressive movement. Now it's kind of getting pulled toward the more conservative religious right type movement. So it kind of makes it slowing and stalling a lot of what I feel legislations.
When Bush came into the presidency, he was only president for 8 years, right? But because he was so against stem cell usage, we are 20 years behind in Alzheimer's research. It's going to take us decades to bounce back from this, if we bounce back at all.
Transgender people still have something like double the enlistment rate of most other Americans.
The new Secretary of the Army that they're wanting to pass through is somebody who is anti-trans, anti-gay. And that could really stagnate to actually push take away some of the rights that was being pushed forward.
It makes me really angry. If Obama had done this, he would already be out of office.
Obama, he didn't do the screaming. He didn't, yell like he was, I have this big stick and I'm going to use it. He was too calm for 8 years. And now we have this loudmouth. And it's just, they're like, oh, that's a real man. No, that's a real idiot.
I remember when he was inaugurated and he's walking out. And what really struck me was Senator Dole, who was in a wheelchair. I remember he just kind of really didn't want to deal with the man because he's in a wheelchair. He gave him 2 minutes, not even that, not even 30 seconds, and he walked away. But Obama spent 3 or 4 minutes with him.
I'm not like a fan of him, but he was like competent. Like he kept the majority of people at ease.
He realized that, like, hey, I know you all didn't vote for me. I know you all weren't feeling me, but I do want to work for all of us, and I do want to, unite this entire country. So I feel like I didn't expect Donald Trump to say anything like that, but it's just like he has no class, it's just walking garbage.
You don't just represent the people who voted for you. You represent the entire country. And if you can't do that, you shouldn't do the job.
I mean, we had Bush, who set the way for Republicans allowing complete idiots, illiterates, people who were simply famous for who they were connected to getting into the White House, followed by Obama, who, was a Democratic president, and that was cool. But the Republican do-nothing Congress, in my opinion, almost sort of forced that in order to make any changes during his presidency, he had to sign a handful of executive orders. And even if they were like in favor of things I like, that was still opposing the checks and balances of the US government. And so those two things combined just led right into Trump.
Here you have a Republican Senate, a Republican House, a Republican president. They're trying to pass a Republican policy that they've been trumpeting at the top of their lungs for 7 years, and they can't unite to do it. These are the people who are going to have to deal with ISIS. These are the people who are going to have to deal with Vladimir Putin's incursions in the Ukraine. These are the people who are going to have to sustain the American economy. These are people who are facing a lot of challenges on the face of the world, and if they can't do better than this, we are in a lot of trouble.
I honestly feel like with everything that he's doing, we're on our way to World War III.
Especially with what's going on in Syria, with us putting warships near North Korea. He's playing a dangerous game.
Assad is using chemical weapons, but he's basically, I had no idea. He's had concentration camps for years, literally taking religious minorities, political opponents, and has been gassing them for years. And we haven't bombed Syria like that. You can't say that this little amount of people was worth what you did.
Historically, republics have tended to fall. Rome used to be an elected republic. It ended up in Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar and all the emperors. Germany had the Weimar Republic after World War I, and that ended in Adolf Hitler. And, the Dutch Republic became the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Venetian Republic became a ossified oligarchy. The Florentine Republic went down. Democracy isn't guaranteed to survive. And I can see enough parallels between what's going on these days, between what happened in those places and what's happening here, to really scare me. There's a real possibility that if it does go the way I'm worried it could go, I could end up dying in a concentration camp. A lot of my friends could end up dying in a concentration camp. I'm not immortal. I'm going to die sometime. I don't really think it matters that much how I die. But I would like to imagine that my country will live on past me. That my people will live on past me. And by people, I mean transgendered people, gays, science fiction fans, folk music fans, East Tennesseans, the whole damn gamut of identities that I and everybody else have. None of us is just one identity. So I guess really I must just say, stand up for your country. Stand up for people's right to vote. Stand up for people's right to due process, because if you don't, there may be nobody to stand up for you.
So, back to your earlier question about what can allies do. Well, don't murder us. That's a good start.
If you're an ally, you help with resources and be there if we need you. I can't stress that enough.
Just don't harass people on the bus, for God's sake. We're just people like everybody else, just trying to get by, And for many of us, at least, it's just a hell of a lot harder than it is for a lot of other people. There's this squeamishness about being too public, about being an ally. Just because, again, of back to our sort of marginal status and all the kind of deep-seated, gut-level stuff that people associate with us.
Passing the mic. A lot of people are like, I want to speak for the marginalized people. I want to speak for people who are oppressed. And it's like, we don't need you to speak for us. We need you to pass the mic. Get off the podium and, put the spotlight on us.
The problem is that if we have everybody else talking for us, then people are not going to really know who we are and what we're really about.
It'd be great to have a trans person speak here or do this. And it's just like, but when that person is homeless or when that person needs food or when that person can't find childcare, everyone's gone. It's not just exploit us for our voices and, or for that. It's the money.
Everyone asks us what we need, and we're like, we need buildings, we need a safe space. Yeah, we need money to do that. We don't want any more spaces that are owned by this corporate company that we don't have ownership over. We need the finances to be able to do that and put this back into our community. And that's what we need, period, point blank, money.
We have to take our power back. We have to let people know who we are.
You work in silence. You work in silence. You never let people around you know what you're doing, especially the enemy who's trying to bury you. You let them think that they have won the battle, and you plan, and you keep making plans, and then you strike them when they least expect it.
Just being a person that we can sit there and talk to about whatever, being that ear is essential for anybody. Because there's been a lot of times where I didn't have that and I literally felt like nobody was there for me, so why not end it? Just being that ear, it's literally essential.
I actually have depression, and I have attempted suicide on 3 different occasions. Reach out to other people around you, and if you need to talk to someone, there's various suicide hotlines. There are therapists. There are places like the Trevor Project that you can call, and get the help you need to stay alive, because you're important and you need to stay with us. Your life is worthwhile, even if it may not seem to matter to this administration. It does matter, and don't forget that.
For me, it would have made such a big difference in my life to see somebody like me and to know that, you don't have to die, you don't have to kill yourself. If you get through the hardest parts, you can go and live a normal life. When you have a president that's on TV and a vice president and his cabinet that are basically telling you it's not okay, you shouldn't be alive, stuff like that, that's my issue with him. Whether he's Republican or not, it's not fair.
He works for us. He's not, the head of a corporation anymore, and people need to make sure to remind him of that.
That's the biggest fear, is that he's going to take away all the rights. He wants to take away gay marriage, he wants to do this, that, and the other. Just let everybody live. It's really simple.
I mean, if we go out, we're going out with a bang, and that's how I look at it. We're going out with a bang because if we're all dying, guess what? We're dying for a reason. We're still going to be who we are, and you're not going to, rain on our parade, period.
Stay woke. Stay woke.
You know, I would see people, but they wasn't my department. You just kind of do your nod, say hi or something. A lot of them would stop and say, "Hey, I hear what you're doing. I think it's really cool that good for you. If it makes you happy, go." And I looked at it, and I'm by the people that stopped talking to me to the people who came up and I started talking to because of this. I think I actually gained a few more people than I actually lost.
I think there's a lot that needs to be done. I think we can fix this in an afternoon. If Mike Pence steps down, Donald Trump nominates Hillary, and then steps down himself, which makes Hillary the president, we can fix all of this in an afternoon.
I just hope that any lawmakers hearing this will understand that they have the power to help people. And if I can just, if my words can get even one person to vote in favor of protecting human decency, of protecting human lives, then that'll be a miracle. And this hateful behavior, it can be changed. We can educate, we can change laws, and we can make this country better for everyone.
If his cabinet and Senate and all of that, if they kind of work together, I think America will be great. It already is great. It's not that it needs to be great again. America is the greatest country on earth. It just things need to be changed. I think after 100 days, I don't want to say that I'm nervous as a transgender individual. I'm waiting to see what he's going to do with the Obamacare, with the Affordable Health Care Act, with all of this. He is doing everything he promised he was going to do. So he's trying to. I just think that there's enough people out there that are going to go against him, that aren't afraid of him, that he's not going to be able to basically win. He's not going to be able to be a dictator. America's not going to let that happen. You just have to hope that people educate themselves well enough. They might not understand it, they might not ever accept it, but they at least have to know that it's out there and that people are just living their lives, let them live their lives. It's not affecting you in any way. Just everybody's different. If we were all the same, it would be really, really boring. Got it?
We have 4 years plus to deal with all of the shit that he is pulling down this pipeline.
And never feel shame if you have to hide, if you have to be in the closet, if you have to be invisible. You aren't hiding, you're just surviving.
In order for us to make change, in order for us to keep living, in order for us not to be found guilty for having sex or found guilty for getting married, we need to stick together, we need to show up in numbers.
Look how far we come, man.
What made you so hateful towards everybody else?
I don't like you.
Why is your asshole on your face?
And I really, really, really wish you would go to prison.
Fuck you. What?
For the rest of your life. You make me sick.
When are you going to resign? Make life easy for all of us, and get on with it and go back to your little world.
Hi, Donald. Hi, President Trump. My name is Hannah Simpson. I'm a transgender Jewish woman. I am part of this country, the country that you have taken guardianship of. Use that power responsibly.
I know that you're from New York and it's been a liberal thing that you have gay friends and you probably know gay people and trans people and stuff. We're not a threat. As a business person, you want the best talent. And whenever you sit there and deny us, we can't be our best potential for a business. And you should just leave everyone have their rights, and then that helps businesses, that helps us. It grows society, the income, everything. So do the right thing.
start trying to connect your actions, your policies, your public statements with, you know, whatever compassion you truly have for us. If you have none, well, you know, nothing really I can do about that. But I mean, if it's in there, and I do understand that, you know, you have your likable sides, just be aware that what you're doing has serious impacts on a lot of people. And, you know, the trans community is in the crosshairs right now. And, you know, for young people in particular, it's really hard. So just keep that in mind.